Welcome to Author Nation. I am Melody Ann, your host. Author Nation is the place to be if you would like to go from idea to successful nonfiction author. We take you from idea to the completed book so you do not make those common mistakes, get overwhelmed, or stuck. All right, we have a nonfiction planning checklist. If you'd like that, it is at authornation.online. It is scrolling past you right now, and it is in the description. Today, we are talking with Gabriel about author money matters because money matters. After 2 divorces and a business failure, Rennie went from broke at age 50 to multimillionaire after learning the 3 secrets of the wealthy, despite failing high school math. Rennie is a TEDx speaker, and he now donates 100% of his profits from his online programs to rescue dogs and soldiers. He is an award-winning, best-selling author of Wealth on Any Income, which has been translated into 8 languages. Please welcome Rennie Gabriel. Hi, Rennie. How are you today?
Terrific, Melody. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Good. I have questions about the bio. So let's start with this one. So you give your money to rescue dogs and soldiers. Is this a program where they're connected?
Yes, one of the programs absolutely is where they are connected. That one is called Shelter to Soldier, and they rescue dogs from environments where they could be euthanized, and they become service animals after lengthy training for soldiers who've had PTSD or traumatic brain injuries who might have otherwise committed suicide. And not one soldier who's received their service dog has committed suicide. So
yes.
For every dollar, I'm saving 2 lives at a time.
That's amazing. I love the idea that they save each other. Yeah. And there's something in, having the responsibility and having a dog brings meaning, right? You can't leave the dog, right? The dog needs you. So I love that. That's a great combination. All right. So tell me a little bit about your relationship with money before we start giving advice. If you don't mind, let's talk a little bit about your relationship with money over the years.
It's frustrating. That would be the one word answer. And the reason, and it's probably compounded frustrating because I was trained as a chartered life underwriter. So I taught other people about life insurance. Then I became a certified financial planner. So I knew about investments and all this stuff. And in none of my coursework was there any education on how to handle money on a foundational level, not how to budget, not how to create a spending plan. None of that was in my coursework. And I found it's even worse because CPAs don't have that in their coursework either. And so the public who would turn to a certified financial planner, a certified financial a certified public accountant, can't get the information on how to handle their money, how to budget from these experts.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't teach it in schools either.
Correct. Oh yeah. It's not taught in school. And, and parents can't teach what they don't know.
Exactly. So exactly. I mean, both my kids learn calculus.
Which will probably not serve them in any area of their life.
Exactly. Yeah, but they didn't learn budgeting, right? They learned calculus, but they didn't learn budgeting. All right. So, thinking about that, right? Knowing calculus, right? Knowing, all your in-depth algebra, it doesn't really help with finances, does it? So like failing math isn't really a piece of understanding money.
That's absolutely correct. And that's so important because when I started to learn about money concepts like discounting or future values or amortization or depreciation, those things just made perfect sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So we need to add, subtract, multiply, and divide.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
That's all that's required.
That's about it. All right. Brilliant. Thank you. That gives so many people hope right there. I'm sure we're done. We're done, guys. That's it. Now you know that we're good. All right. So why do so many of us have issues with money?
Well, it's the messages that we've gotten as we were growing up, like money doesn't grow on trees, or I'm not
Yeah.
made of money. Or, like I said, parents can't pass on what they don't know.
Yeah.
And, it that's how it happens. I mean, one of the books, I had a book publishing company, and one of the books we published was called Couples and Money. And one of the things that causes, I'm going to have to clear my throat, excuse me.
Please go ahead.
And one of the things that causes the most divorces are arguments over money. And this book has that solution from the standpoint that it asks questions like, what was your mother's role concerning finances when you were growing up? What was your father's role? Are you like your father? Are you like your mother? Did you think you were rich or poor? And by the time you answer these questions, you're able to be conscious in how you grew up around money.
Yeah.
And then with your partner, you have a conversation. They write down what their experiences were. You write down what your experiences were. And it's like men are from Mars and women are from Venus. And you understand where each partner's coming from.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you saw your parents fight about money, wouldn't that be something you wouldn't want to bring up because you knew it would start a fight later on in life?
Oh, absolutely right.
Right.
I mean, you
Yeah.
don't want to talk about money because you saw your parents fighting over it. So
Yeah.
it's a topic you would avoid. And
Yes.
this
Yes.
has
Yes.
to become conscious.
Yes, yes. In my case, when my parents separated, my father stole all the money and hid it in a Swiss bank account. That's a whole other story. Um, we have some very interesting money issues in my family. Right? I've had a money story I've needed to work through. All right. So once you learned this, you decided you were going to write a book. So so that other people could learn no matter where they are in life. Because as you said, it was, you were 50 when you kind of had this epiphany. It's like, wait a minute, I don't have to live like this anymore. So you decided to write your book. So can you tell us a little bit? You talked about emotions. So do you, in the book with couples, so is there a emotional piece in the book? Is there can you tell us a little bit about what to expect?
Oh, yeah. I mean, in my book, Wealth on Any Income, the first third of it is devoted to the emotional components. It's what are the money messages you got? I have the questionnaire from the Couples and Money book in there. It's, what are the things that are in the way of you creating wealth? And it has to do with your personal values, what's important to you. They need to be identified. All of that is the first third because Melody, let me put you on the spot.
Yes.
Do you know anyone who is obese?
Yes.
Okay. And next question. Do you think they know, this is about knowledge, do you think they know what it takes to lose weight?
Most of them do. Yes. I'd say yes.
Yeah. My guess is it's probably closer to 99.4% have the knowledge.
Yeah.
The knowledge is irrelevant. That's the booby prize. Because just because you have the knowledge, you've got the emotional stuff that's in the way of applying it. So before I get into tips and techniques on how to handle money, that's why the first third of the book deals with the emotional components. That has to be gotten out of the way first. I
love that. All right. If you're listening in, learn more about Rennie at RennieGabriel.com. We have a lot more coming up. I guess, the secrets of the wealthy, I guess one of the secrets is their emotional relationship with it. Is that, would that be one of the secrets of being wealthy?
Yes. I call it the attitudes of the wealthy. They have different attitudes than ordinary people. As an example, wealthy people will talk about money where ordinary people think, oh, that's a taboo subject. Wealthy people enjoy debt, but they have the right kind, not the wrong kind. The reason I was able to go from broke at age 50 to multimillionaire 8 years later was because of properly using debt. That helped make me wealthy. So these are the kinds of attitudes that the wealthy have, as well as identifying what their values are, operating from that and not just their feelings, whole host of things like that. So
yeah. All right. So lay out the secrets for us. What are the secrets?
Okay, there are three. There's three secrets and there's subsections, obviously, but the three secrets are really easy to remember. I use the acronym AFI, which has nothing to do with the American Film Institute. Okay, the A stands for attitude. They have a different attitude. What are they? They're explained as a part of the three secrets. The second one, F, is for forms. As an example, they look at an income and expense statement and see where is their money coming from. It's not just a paycheck. And where are they spending their money? And are they getting the level of pleasure based on where they're spending money? So with these questions, they're looking at their income and expense form. And as an example, with the balance sheet, a lot of people look at the balance sheet and say, oh, my home is worth so much money. But their home is not an asset that generates income unless they're using it for an Airbnb. Their home generates expenses. There's the insurance, there's the maintenance, there's the property taxes, there's the mortgage payments. There's, the water heater bursts and it's got to be replaced. The house doesn't generate an income, it generates expenses. So a wealthy person doesn't look at their house as real estate that's a part of their wealth. They look at other real estate they own that generates an income. That's just one example of what they'll look at on the balance sheet. They want to know, what is it that's going to generate an income for me if I choose to stop working?
Okay. And so the I is income.
The I is broader than that. It's investments.
Investments.
So the
Okay.
A is attitude, the F is forms and how they look at them, and the I is investments. The wealthy are not limited to stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. I mean, they've got peer-to-peer lending, they have equipment leasing, they have their own business, they have real estate, which could be 20 different categories by itself, from apartment buildings to storage facilities, to commercial office buildings, to office parks, to triple net leases, to trust deeds. I mean, it just goes on and on.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so AFI, what gets in our way then? If there must be something that's getting in our way, like myths, we talked about the emotional piece, but there, because I grew up with this emotional stuff, I also have these false beliefs. What are some of those that kind of get in our way?
You're absolutely right. There are myths that people buy into. And one of them I kind of touched on, which was the debt. And one of the things that frustrates me so much is when I hear some financial guru or some CPA tell their client, oh, you need to pay off your credit cards first before you begin to invest. That is one of the most damaging myths that is out there. And I'll give you the perfect example in my own situation. When I was 50, I probably had about $15,000 of credit card debt. I'm just barely making a living. I'm earning $5,000 a month. I'm looking at my situation thinking, I'm 50 years of age. In 15 years, if I want to stop working, am I going to be eating cat food or can I have tuna? Okay. So I started using principles that, maybe we'll touch on, but the key here is the credit card debt. And well, one of the principles that that's foundational is 5,000 years old. Can I put you on the spot again?
Yes, absolutely. I'm totally good being put on the spot anytime you want. Don't need to ask.
Perfect. Okay. So Melody, have you heard of the expression, pay yourself first?
Yes.
Okay, great. Can you explain it?
It means that when the money comes in, you take the part for your whatever it is that you choose to spend it on, and you put that aside, and then you pay anyone else you might owe.
You're pretty close.
Okay.
Pretty close. Pay yourself first means that portion that you set aside first is yours to keep. It will not be spent. So as an example, I mean, the concept's 5,000 years old. It's written about in a book called The Richest Man in Babylon by George Clayson. Anyway, he uses 10%. So I'm earning
Yeah.
5,000 a month. I set aside 10% to keep for the rest of my life. And that's what I will use to invest. And that's what creates the financial freedom. So in my example regarding the debt, okay, I had $15,000 of credit card debt. I continue making the minimum payments on my credit card debt. And in 3 years, I saved up $18,000. I could have used that $18,000 to pay off the debt, and then I'd have no debt. Let me ask you another question.
Mhm.
If you had no debt, no credit card debt, no auto loans, no mortgages, no business loans, I'm just saying you had no debt. And the only thing I'm saying is, if you had no debt, would you be financially free and could you stop working?
No, because people still live paycheck to paycheck. So I grew up, growing up, debt was bad. In my house, debt was bad, like bad, like dumb people do debt, poor people do debt. Nobody else should do debt. And so I was raised with the mindset that debt was really bad. And so don't borrow to invest, because that's bad. Yeah, I hope I answered your question. I added a little on though.
Pretty close. So the question being, if you had no debt,
Yeah.
could you stop working? And you said no,
No.
because unless you have assets that are generating income, you still have to work for a paycheck so you could buy food or pay the utilities.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the frustrating thing when I hear people say you need to focus on paying off debt, and then the car breaks down and they have to put it on a credit card, or something else happens, and they're on this roller coaster of paying off debt and it comes back, and paying off debt and it comes back. And they never started investing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Good
what I'm
point.
getting at, and that gets back to my good debt, bad debt kind of conversation. Bad debt is credit card debt. Good debt is when you're borrowing money and putting it to use where it's generating more money than it costs you to borrow that money.
Right. Right.
And so I borrowed money. So getting back to my own situation, instead of paying off my credit cards with that 18,000 I saved up, my wife had this realtor who said, Rennie, you should buy this little 3-unit property. I said, well, all I have is $18,000. I can't do it. I mean, I'm in Los Angeles. $18,000 doesn't buy anything. Exactly. So my wife said, well, I'll chip in $18,000. And the realtor says, this is such a good deal. I'll chip in $36,000. And the three of us came up with the money for the down payment, and we bought it together, which has me create my expression, wealth creation is a team sport, not a solo sport.
Yeah. Yes.
So
Yes.
that $18,000 in 5 years turned into $125,000.
Nice.
If I'd have paid off my credit card debt instead, I wouldn't have had the money to buy this 3-unit property, which means 5 years later, I'd have had no debt. But instead, I had $125,000 more money. And
right. And then the credit card debt didn't matter to you, did it?
No, because the rents from the building were making my credit card payments for me.
Yes. Yeah.
And I borrowed, and this is where the good debt comes in. I borrowed more money to make down payments on more apartment buildings with my wife and the realtor.
Yeah.
And within 8 years, we had 50 apartment units we owned and we managed. And so that's how I went from broke at 50 to age 58 being a multimillionaire, because I treated myself like I mattered and paid myself first. Yeah. And I used good debt to buy the apartment buildings. And now whatever I charge on a credit card is paid in full every month from the rental income.
Yeah. Yeah. You said something really important here. You said, I treated myself like I mattered.
Yes. I shouldn't have glossed over that. But that is the key to paying yourself first, is treating yourself like you matter. You come first, not the grocer, not the mortgage, not the car payment. You come first. And if you don't treat yourself that way, but you pay everybody else first and you take what's left over, if there's anything, that is not the road to wealth.
Yeah. Nice. So I want to ask you who matters. What I mean is, who's your book for? Who matters to you?
Pretty much everyone. And this is the silly part. I didn't understand how a book works. And what I'm getting at is, I was doing workshops teaching this information. And after 10 years, I said, you know what? I'm getting the same questions over and over again. I'm dealing with the emotional stuff. I'm just going to put it all in a book, and then people will leave me alone and I don't have to do the workshops. You're laughing because you realize that isn't how it works when you write a book. No, after I wrote the book, more people wanted to talk to me or work with me or have them talk to their insurance agents or their financial planners and do presentation. This is my naivety. I thought after I write this book, I'm done and people will leave me alone. So I wrote it for the people who struggle with money, the people who have credit card debt. I wrote it because children can't be taught by their parents who don't know how to teach them. I even got a program into high school districts to teach students how to handle money through an educational endowment. And we got it into 20 high school districts, not high schools. So that was my objective. That's who I wrote the book for.
Yeah, that's great, because this is what they should be teaching in high school, right? How to handle your money. So when we come out, we actually know what we're doing, right?
Yes.
And so I want to ask how the book changed your life.
Well, it's funny. In two ways, it changed my life. One of them is I realized it's the calling card to make more money. As an example, I booked a presentation with an insurance company who purchased 5,000 copies of the book for their field force. So I discovered how a book is actually used. And I had to remind myself of the concepts in the book, because several years ago, I stopped tracking my money, which is one of the things I have in the book that is the key to creating the wealth. And I stopped doing it because I was wealthy. I didn't think I had to pay attention to spending money at Starbucks or meals out.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was talking to my assistant and I said, we got into a conversation about what I spent on educational programs for the online space. And I said, I think it was about $125,000. And she said, no, Rennie, you're not even close. So what are you talking about? Then we went over it and I discovered I spent $400,000 almost unconsciously because I stopped tracking my money.
Yeah. Interesting. What do you do when tracking your money is too scary? Like when you're in debt, right? I'm thinking about people who are in debt, and they know that tracking is useful, but every time they track it, they're further in debt, and they start tracking it makes you desperate. What do you do then?
Well, that's the importance of asking questions with where the money is being spent. And that's one of the points of a tracking tool, is to ask questions like, did I get the level of pleasure I just paid? If I wanted to stop working, is this getting me closer to my goal or farther from my goal?
Yeah.
So as you spend the money and you're tracking it, you ask questions. And one of the things, as an example, I discovered as I was spending my money and tracking it, was I couldn't stand going to the grocery store. I didn't want to buy groceries and come home with my wife and cook things, because when we eat at home, we're jumping up and down, or we're watching TV, or I forgot the napkin or the salt, or I dropped the fork, or, oh, I want more to drink. We're not sitting there having a conversation. But when my wife and I go out to eat, we're sitting there and the server is taking care of the napkin or the salt or the refilling the drinks. And my wife and I can have a conversation and we're not watching TV.
Yeah.
So one of the things I realized was I value going out to eat more than going to the grocery store, which means that's the proper category for me to spend money because I value the relationship with my wife. Well, unless I track it and ask the questions, I don't have those answers.
Yeah. Great point. Great point. Thank you. So I just want to let everyone know and remind everyone that buying the book actually supports a cause. You support rescue dogs and soldiers who are facing injury and trauma. So if you're interested in grabbing a book and supporting the cause, you can go to www.wealthonanyincome.com and grab the book there. Rennie, I want to start talking about authors and money because, talking about making money on any income, there's this thing with authors, sometimes they come to me and say, yeah, I want to write a book, but I've heard that I'm going to spend more money than I'll ever make. Books, you don't write, people don't buy books. Like most authors only sell 1,000 books in the entire lifetime of the book. And so I want to write a book, but what's the point? So can you kind of talk a little bit about your experience as an author and your experience with money and kind of give us our mindset, how you suggest we think about things?
Their thinking is correct, but unfortunately, it's inaccurate. And what I'm getting at is, wait a second, how can it be correct and inaccurate at the same time? Yes, they won't make a lot of money by selling the book. They'll only make a lot of money by using the book as the tool to make money. And here's what I'm getting at. I had a book publishing company for about 10 years, and I sold it because I lost interest. But one of my authors was a real estate agent, and he wrote a book on buyer agency, meaning how does someone who's looking to buy a home find a realtor who will represent them in the transaction? And a lot of people run around thinking that if a realtor is showing them homes, that realtor has their best interest at heart and will negotiate the best on their behalf. And 20 years ago, the law said that the realtor who shows you a house, if it's not his listing, has an obligation to the seller of the house to represent the seller in their best interest, not the person who's looking to buy the house. And so by law, the realtor who is showing them around not only didn't have their best interest at heart, by law had the interest of the seller. So he wrote a book on how to represent buyers instead, and he would have buyers sign a contract, this, that, and the other. Well, 5 months after his book came out, and he's using this to get buyers, he's using this to get listings, he increased his income by $165,000 by using his book to get more buyers and get more listings and referrals. There were real estate agents in other parts of the country that were referring buyers and sellers to him because of the book that he wrote.
Yeah.
So what I'm getting at is he spent about $8,000 to publish his book. I mean, this is a long time ago.
Yeah.
He made an extra $165,000 giving the book away.
Yeah.
He didn't care about selling it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you bring up an interesting point, because one thing I often say to authors is that, what are you going to say in your book that nobody else is saying, that nobody wants to talk about? What are, what industry street secrets are old-fashioned and outdated, and we need to break them, and you need to be the person to come out and say, this is how things are happening. This is what you need to know. And this is how to get your best interests met, right? Because a lot of times people want you to toe the line, but authors who don't toe the line often do better than authors who toe the line. I mean, obviously you don't break laws, but yes. So should I go into debt to write a book?
If you know how to use the book as leverage to produce an income, yes, because you're talking about going into debt or borrowing money or using it to generate money. And what I'm saying, the perfect example was the realtor. If he'd have borrowed the $8,000 to publish his book, and it turns around and generates another $165,000 of additional income for him, I'd say that's a good trade-off. But getting to the point that you talked about, you need to know how to write the book to serve the audience that you're talking to. And there's plenty of books on real estate. There's so many books on real estate.
Yeah.
But there's two differences here. One of them is he addressed an issue that others weren't willing to talk about, which was representing the buyer. And number two, when he'd be meeting with a prospective client, he was a book author. That created credibility. What the word authority breaks down to if you cut off the ITY? Yeah, author.
Yeah, that's where it comes from.
The people he was meeting with, they weren't meeting with any other authors of real estate.
Yeah.
And this gave him the credibility.
So this is a slight tangent, but I'm really curious because we've talked about debt a couple of times, and I think this is something that everyone's going to be interested in, including authors. So when do I know when to go into debt and when not to?
When you've established how the book will serve growing your income.
Yeah.
And, if you're a realtor, if you're a doctor, if you're a financial planner, if you're whatever, if you create the action plan, the business plan on how that book will be used to generate an income, then it makes sense to go into debt and do the darn thing.
Yeah. Let's broaden this a little bit. What I want is, don't go into debt to buy a car, but do go into debt to invest in real estate, right? Don't go into debt to ABC, but do go into debt. Can you just give us a bit of a breakdown? Like, how do we know when, right? So because like even investing in a book, going into debt for a book, it's still a risk, right? So how do we know where to draw that line?
It's when you have concrete, real plans on how the book will be leveraged. And I used to own a pension administration company, and I saw, it was very sad to me. An employer might be dissolving his retirement plan, and he's going to take the money and invest it. And his employees are going to get this money. But instead of them rolling it into an individual retirement account, they were going out and making a down payment on a new car or going out and buying a big screen TV.
Yeah.
Because, I'm trying to think of who it was. It might have been Warren Buffett who had this quote, "The wealthy think for generations, and the poor think for Saturday night."
Yeah, I think that was Warren Buffett. It sounds very familiar. He's got some great quotes.
Absolutely.
Right?
I love the man.
Yeah.
And,
all right. So
yeah,
all of our debt decisions should be based on having a concrete plan to use that money to generate income.
Correct. And so
even if it's risky,
it into two areas.
Yeah. So even if it's risky.
Yeah.
Okay.
Either you're spending them, if you're going into debt for a consumer product, which is, a TV, a meal, your car, those are consumer items. You will consume those products. If that's what you're going into the debt for, then that's called bad debt. If you're going into debt to create an income, whether it's the down payment on an apartment building or a second home or a book or your business or your marketing, when you have a concrete plan to generate an income from going into that debt, that's good debt.
All right. Brilliant. Thank you. And I know that we're, going a little away from authors at that moment, but I think that's a really good point, and I wanted to cover it. So back to authors. Authors often have trouble with spotty revenue, right? And even I'm just going to expand this a little bit, because some of the people watching the show don't write one book to integrate into the business. I do have those people in my audience. I also have people in my audience who are what I'm going to call authorpreneurs. They write, 6 books, or so. They have lots of book ideas, and they start writing books, and they know that they aren't necessarily going to get, it's not a virtuous circle immediately, right? By the time they get on book 3, they have a following. People are buying their book because they know them and whatnot. And so what happens is there's that spotty revenue, right? That cash flow dilemma. Can you talk a little bit about, uneven revenue and cash flow, and what authors can do around that to feel financially more viable?
Okay. I'm going to talk about it in several ways. One of them is multiple streams of income.
Right.
And I'm guessing multiple books, they're thinking multiple streams of income, but that's not what I mean.
Right.
Okay. So they write the first book and they're selling and they've created an audience. Again, it gets back to how are they leveraging that book? Are they doing speaking engagements? Are they doing corporate training? Are they doing seminars, workshops? What are they doing? Coaching? What are they doing besides the revenue from the book? Okay. So multiple streams of income, and that's what I'm referring to. And when it comes to writing more books, I got a great example, and it's Mike Michalowicz. Mike Michalowicz wrote a book called Profit First.
Yes.
He's written probably a total of 5, or maybe it's 6 books, almost fitting the example you spoke about.
Yeah.
And I had Mike on my podcast, which is Wealth on Any Income also. And in it, he spoke about being the author business person. And he's actually built up a team of people that support him in his business and with the number of books that he's published. And his income comes from multiple sources and multiple books.
Yeah.
So, it's I think that's the easiest answer. It's you're not limited to just the book revenue.
Yeah.
And, it's what we've been talking about. Become an author business person. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And thinking about it like it's a business, right? And I find that some authors really, they want that, but they have some kind of blocks or obstacles in the way. There's something about, well, if I'm writing, I shouldn't be expecting money, but I find a lot of authors have this, I'm writing because I love writing. And then they put the book out into the world and it's not selling. And it's like, yeah, but I'm writing because I love writing. It's, yeah, but do you want to make money? Yeah, I'd like to make money because I'd like to be able to afford to write another book. Okay, so now what, right?
Yeah. This is so beautiful because it's the same kind of conversation I have once in a while when I'm doing my podcast, because I don't generate income from it. I do it because I enjoy it. I get to meet interesting people and other authors and folks like you. And so I have to be honest with myself. If I'm not concerned about generating an income from it, then don't try and call it a business revenue source.
Yes. Okay. Fair. Yes. And have another way that you're generating income. Recognize that unless you're wealthy and don't need to generate any income because you have enough to last you and your children the rest of their lives, have another way to generate income. So if it's the love of writing, make it the love of writing and separate that out and have another way to make money.
Yes.
And if the love of writing ties into finances, take that seriously and build it as a business. Is that what you're suggesting?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. Yes, Melody. It's so funny. It's like an artist who And this is a mentality, and this is the whole point of attitudes and all the rest of it, and values, where some artists have this idea that artists are starving artists. No, only starving artists are starving artists. Salvador Dali wasn't starving. Picasso wasn't starving. None of these authors were starving artists because they were also marketing what they did.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to market it, it's okay. Be
Yes,
honest
yes.
about it. If you want to just write, then
Yeah,
just
yes.
write.
Yeah. So some famous artists were starving, and then they died, and then their paintings got famous, and everyone else got wealthy off of it.
Yeah, like Van Gogh, exactly.
But we don't want to be that person.
Exactly.
Right? We don't want to be that person. Awesome.
Yes.
So,
and by the way, and I think most people know Van Gogh had some serious emotional issues.
Yes, I believe so.
He wasn't going to be a business person artist.
No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. Yet he does such amazing work. Or he did, pardon me, he's passed.
Yes.
Sorry.
Oh,
I said he does. Just because his work is still so alive, right? Even though he I think about him in the present tense. All right. Thank you very much. If you want to buy the book, wealthonanyincome.com, you are supporting rescue dogs and injured and soldiers with post-traumatic stress disorder. Can you just, on the way out, I want to talk a little bit. I know you did a TED Talk, and I think that if people want to follow up and learn more about you, it would be really cool for them to see that. So can you just give us like your 1-minute pitch on your TED Talk and where we might find it?
Yes, actually, you can find it on YouTube and on my website. So if they go to wealthonanyincome.com and just put /TEDx, they'll see my TEDx talk, where I talk about how we've been programmed to believe it's better to be poor than to be wealthy. And
I love that.
You know what? And there's a quote that I got from Warren Buffett that deals with this attitude. It's another one of my favorite quotes. And he says, of the billionaires I have met, if they were jerks before they had money, they were simply jerks with $1 billion.
Yes.
And the opposite of that is true. And so that could be one of the attitudes that people say, oh, well, I don't want to be wealthy because I'll turn into a jerk.
Yeah.
Only if they're a jerk to start with.
Yes.
Good people who become wealthy are still good people. Philanthropically minded people who create wealth still become and stay philanthropic.
Yeah, really, really good point. Thank you. And so to see that, go to wealthonanyincome.com /TEDx. Is that correct? And
That's
I will
correct.
make sure that is in the description as well. Rennie, have we missed anything that's really important that we haven't touched on yet?
We talked about philanthropy. Well, also on that page, they can get a 9-step roadmap to complete financial choice and philanthropy, and a 27-page explanation. And to those people that request that, I send out a weekly email with more tips and techniques.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate all your advice. Money is such a touchy topic, and I like to talk about things that other people don't want to talk about. I'm a little bit of a rebel that way. So thank you very much for joining us today, Rennie. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Melody. It's been my pleasure and my honor.
Brilliant. Thank you. So for everyone else out there, thank you for joining us today. Author Nation is here to provide you a path from idea to successful nonfiction author, whatever that means to you. So join the community and learn what it's like to work with like-minded professionals. You can find us at authornation.community. That is scrolling past you right now, and it is in the description. Next week, we are going to be talking to Tana Marshall, and we're going to be talking about writing with flow. So what we're talking about is writer's block and not having it so that your writing flows beautifully. See you then.